So here we have Eileen Donahoe. She's the Director of Global Affairs at Human Rights Watch, and she's attending Freedom Online Coalition, which is hosted in Mongolia. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. So my first question will be on the organization you're from. What is Human Rights Watch is for?
Human Rights Watch is a global human rights organization that looks at both country situations and thematic human rights issues on a global basis around the world, and basically tries to call governments to step up to the plate and live up to their obligations under international human rights law to protect citizens and protect universal human rights.
So here on the protecting the human rights, here today we're hearing the human rights word a lot.
Yes.
Because everything linked to using internet or going online is directly links to human rights. So more on that, please.
Yes. Oh, so many dimensions of that. So most basic ideas, this is called the Freedom Online Coalition. And the original idea was to ensure that the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, freedom of movement, access to information, basic civil political rights were protected in the online space as in the offline space. That was the original idea. Now, as society has adopted digital technology to such an extent, there are so many other ways in which the internet, information communication technology, and the digitization of everything has affected society and affects the enjoyment of human rights. And so, in fact, today, some of the speakers at the opening plenary, were commenting on how the online world and the offline world have almost collapsed.
Yes.
That the digital world is our world.
So it's like part of our real world, right?
It's our real world. And therefore, protecting human rights in the digital context is the same as protecting human rights.
So should we see this same as offline, or there should be some kind of a specific regulations or laws or some other criteria for online?
Great question. So at the level of principle, human rights must be protected online as offline, the same. And that principle was laid down at the UN Human Rights Council in 2012 with a broad coalition. It was a consensus outcome asserting that basic human rights concepts, principles, and international human rights law apply online as offline. But the context of implementing those principles and how you ensure that those rights are respected and protected is sometimes different, and there's new dimensions to the digital context that were not imagined in the offline world. And so to some extent there needs to be new articulation of existing principles so that we know how to apply those enduring human rights principles, how to apply the rule of law in the digital space. Sometimes there are new challenges because of the digital context. Doesn't mean the principles are different.
So it's just about the concept that's differing. Because I think the online world is much more faster.
Yes.
And it can just reach within like a fraction of a second.
Yes.
And this, like, let's say, compared to conventional, let's say, means of media.
Yes.
It can ruin one's reputation or company. It can just go any extent that one can imagine.
So one of the ways we think about that is to say that the rapid adoption, exponential adoption of digital technology in a short period of time has radically increased the way people around the world exercise their human rights and also empowered governments and others to abuse human rights.
Yes.
So in some aspects, it has been a facilitator of rights because of the speed, because of the global connectivity, access to information that's instantaneous. All of those things have been beneficial. The new technologies have facilitated all kinds of human rights organizing around the globe, unforeseen a decade ago. Unfortunately for human rights, same thing has happened in terms of abuse of human rights and violations, and the technology has facilitated whole new ways for human rights abusers to squelch speech, to censor speech, filter, block, to monitor. And there's a very ominous and dark side to the technology as well as a positive side.
And many participants were also mentioning the freedom for the journalists as the means for for others to exercise their freedom of expression, so that many were linking the media in here.
Yes.
So to which extent this can be applied to journalists, to their human rights, to their right to do their job in an interest of a public?
Yes, that's a great question. Being today International World Press Freedom Day, it's a very important question, and I think that, again, on some level, citizen journalists, bloggers have been great beneficiaries of these new technologies. And it's allowed people around the world to express themselves in whole new ways. And we've really expanded the definition of what is a journalist because of new technology. But of all the groups that are most negatively affected by what governments can do with the technology, journalists are up there, along with sometimes human rights defenders. But journalists have seen a very detrimental effect because of communication technology and surveillance and governments basically shutting down their free speech through technological means. So it's for whatever reason, journalists have been on the receiving end of some of the worst aspects of this new capacities for governments to abuse rights through technology.
So for a comparatively younger nation, because most of our population are young people, so with that we have the whole nation can transfer it to all the digital or all online thing very rapidly.
Yes.
So there's a big potential to make a quick shift.
Yes.
So in that regard, what should Mongolian government or the civil society or any other organization, any other stakeholders should be aware of in that sense?
Yes. Okay. First thing that comes to mind is privacy. When everything we do, as we just said, offline world is now online. It's collapsed. And so when everything you say is done through digital means, it's capturable, it's trackable, it's monitorable. And I think young people need to be educated early, as early as possible, in the ramifications of using digital technology and the fact they need to know where is that digital information going, who has access to it, what are the rules about how it can be used, why it can be used, by whom it can be used.
And how one can protect her or himself, right?
Her or himself, and it's not only her or himself, but her or his digital communication. I call it digital stuff. It's your digital identity. Don't give it away without understanding the consequences. It's yours, it's your identity, it's your communication, and it should be confidential unless you say otherwise.
So you suggest to start from the very early ages, from now on, to advocate on the use of internet to protect oneself. Digital identity.
Yes, on your digital identity, and then another dimension that people are talking about is digital hygiene, which means that you basically get trained in digital security and how to protect yourself from criminal elements, criminal hackers, and unrestrained surveillance, etc., and monitoring, and protect
so we're
yourself.
not just talking about the cyberbullying or just being abused over the internet or online, but it's more expansive site.
Exactly. And cyberbullying is a whole other area in terms of educating people about how to stay out of conversations they don't want to be part of or make themselves subject to hate online, but they're just losing control of your digital identity and your communication is something people need to become much more sophisticated about.
So why I have asked about this, because nowadays there are many younger generation getting involved into the digital world, and they're just trying to abuse or bully, but then they also have to understand that after the online world is not just bullying, it's not just expressing yourself, right? But there is more to it. So I just wanted to point it out. So it's more expansive.
It's much more expansive, and this is a good way where what you should have and could have been taught in the offline world, you should bring to the online world. Bullying should not be tolerated in the offline world. It should not be the norm in the online world, and people need to remember that these two realms have now collapsed, and that we are creating the world we want to live in.
Okay, thank you for your time today and accepting my invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.